Hey everybody, you're back with Dave and Ed. This is episode 8 of To the Death podcast.
Today on the podcast, we are very excited to have Emily Kwok as a guest. She is a former world champion, IBJJF, one of the first non-Brazilian champions.
That's all Ed knows about her though, so I'll fill in a little bit more. She's a multiple-time world champion, ADCC vet, owner of Princeton BJJ.
She was very generous with her time with us, and we talked about a plethora of things.
A plethora?
I don't think that was the right word.
That's a good word. Is it the right word?
I don't
know.
think so.
It's a big word. Let's keep it in there. So yeah, we talked about a whole number of things. She is willing to coach and train me, but not to beat Ed. She wants me to just be better overall. She has a fantastic mindset, and it was really quite enlightening talking to her.
Was it really, Dave? I feel like you didn't make any connections. I was making plenty of connections.
Sometimes I think a lot of the connections are in your head.
I don't think so.
She definitely didn't even like you.
That's up for debate.
I
but
definitely texted her afterwards, and she said she would meet and speak with me again, but you're not welcome.
Not true. You disagreed with her on all her things. We put you in your place, as we should.
Listen, it's the same thing I keep telling you. I don't know why you make me repeat myself. I don't like repeating myself. Opposites attract.
Well, it's great to have your dull-headed perspective on things, and me to be even-headed and to agree with the guest, and you disagree with the guest, which is hilarious.
Listen, both of us were really out of our depth on this one.
She is way too smart for us.
Way too smart for us.
But she was very generous, and she's trying to pull us along to her level.
She was. She's like, go get an education, come back and see me, and this podcast will be so much better. She didn't say any of that. She's way too positive for anything like that.
This was our first female guest.
That's right. So we had a couple of emails and social media postings requesting perspectives from female athletes, and I hope that you guys got what you were looking for.
Especially you, Jess. Thank you for the questions. Anybody else, if you have questions, we are willing to ask our guests these questions.
Yes, we definitely are willing to take those suggestions, questions, or anything, and we'll take them out there to the world for you guys to come back and listen to and get your perspectives, answers, whatever.
I mean, we're just ramping it up here with the guests. This is a fantastic guest, and we hope to have more in the future. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode. This is To the Death podcast.
Episode 8.
All right, and we're going.
We're good?
Here we go.
We're going right now?
Go ahead, Dave.
So I text Ed early this morning because we knew we were coming down here, and I said, make sure you have a mask. It's either we both have to wear masks or I have to go on my own. So he's been panicking all day. He showed up to pick me up with 2 masks.
I said, Dave, where's your mask?
Panicking. What do you mean you don't have a mask? I forgot my mask, Ed. So that was a nice little joke that I got to play on him.
He's always giving me a hard time. I can never tell. Sometimes you can't tell in text, like sarcasm at all. He doesn't give me any clues. I'm like, this is serious. I'm like, all right, now I'm going to have to adjust the audio. What's going to happen here? All these thoughts start going through my head. And we show up and...
Better to be safe than sorry.
So
what if you showed up here with no masks, no gloves, and then I would have been like, nope, interview's off, can't do it.
I would have like...
I should have messaged you ahead of time. Oh, my God. That would have been
Emily,
so much better.
Is there a Wawa around here or something?
I should have gotten you in on the joke. That would be fantastic. Oh, my goodness. So now if you look at us and you look at Ed specifically, can you tell just by looking at him? I mean, look at this disgrace. Would you think he does jiu-jitsu?
Man, there's a lot of people I look at and I'm like, how do you do jiu-jitsu?
And
But they do it. But they do. Can I? Oh, you know what? This is a good time to bring up. So we've been running virtual classes. And I've been trying to get all of my staff on board just because, it's good to have the students see the instructors, maintain some level of communication while we're sort of not training together. And one of our instructors, correct me if I'm wrong, Gerald, I hope I'm not wrong. I think he's 68 years old. He's a retired cop. He's like 6'4", 6'5", a giant of a human being. And do you know, for his first class virtually, it took us a while to get him up onto the virtual platform, but he taught on Zoom. And do you know his first class was teaching the class how to do like berimbolo rolls and like Granby rolls and stuff.
And this is a giant.
This guy, and he's 68. What 68-year-old man do you know that can put his head to his toes and roll like shoulder to shoulder?
That sounds like a guy that has to be doing a lot of yoga.
I don't know. It was nuts.
I'll tell you what, Ed's not doing any berimbolos.
Listen, we drilled him yesterday.
No, you did not. I want video of this.
Bolos isn't in my future, but...
Donuts are in your future, aren't they?
You cannot look at people and say,
I know, he loves to judge. I've been telling him, this is
just you. I'm only judging you, Ed, because every time I see you, and I see you all the time, you're bigger.
Yeah.
I'm actually getting smaller now. 206 is good.
Then maybe today you're just bloated. You're
I've been telling
retaining
him
water.
I've been telling him more. I've been listening to your podcast, and no judgments. Try to take judgments out of it. Don't let judgments in, and don't put any judgments out.
Now you want to project positivity. All of the sudden.
What do you mean? I started this because I started this.
This guy, he has this recording equipment. I was on him for months. We should do a podcast. One day, finally, he caved. I don't know what it was, but he caved.
It was my wife.
Why did you have the equipment?
Because you know how you do home videos with your family and stuff? I listened to Ari Shafir's podcast, and he uses this exact equipment. And I was like, all right, let me get that equipment. And I started just recording in my basement, just me and my wife, for kind of talking to my kids when they get older, because I have 2 young daughters that, barely talk. So I think it would be fun if they listened to us in 20 years to see what we were like, because I would love to see my mom at 30, what her thought, your thought
Kind
process.
of cool idea.
Yeah, it can't be, you're not the same. Like you now from when you were 20, imagine you would you even be friends with yourself? I wouldn't be friends with myself.
Yeah, I would.
I was a real loser back when I was 20.
What do you mean were?
You wouldn't be here right now if I was still a loser.
That might be true, but it took so much pushing for me to get you out of loser zone.
Sometimes I need a little push. I take a lot of breaks.
Yeah. How do you feel about breaks?
Is he pushing you or is he dragging you down?
I'm definitely pushing. I'm pushing. I can show you text messages, all right, of me projecting positivity on him because he's dragging himself down.
Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, you were saying, how do I feel about breaks?
How do you feel about when your students take breaks?
Well, I think my answer to this has probably changed over the years, but it's, when I look back at when I've had to take breaks, some of them have been breaks that I've induced, right? Having children or going on a honeymoon or, having some sort of a life. Other breaks have been forced upon me, injuries and whatnot. And I think it's a really, your time in jiu-jitsu is a very personal thing. I don't think it's my place as an instructor or as someone in your circle as you go through your jiu-jitsu journey. It's not really my place to judge. You're going to get what you're going to get out of it. Some people are going to go through that like a house on fire. Other people are going to move at a turtle's pace. But whatever your goal is, if you get to where you want to get to or you're moving closer towards that, then I think that's cool. I mean, there's certainly people who I meet who I go, oh man, you have a lot of potential. I wish you would train more. But that's what I want for them, not maybe what they want for themselves,
Do you think the job of a teacher isn't just to teach? Maybe a part of it is to motivate as well, like to motivate them to the point where they don't want to take breaks. Like me personally, the breaks I take are not necessary. I should be on the mat.
Laziness.
Yeah, it's just straight laziness. And my instructor, Yanni, from time to time, he'll just send me a text and be like, hey, what's up? And that's enough for me. If he does that, I'm fully shamed and I get back on the mats. Do you think an instructor has a part to play in it, or they should just let you do your own kind of path?
I mean, I think it depends on the scale, right? So can you inspire people and can you motivate people to do things? For sure. But at a certain point, like if you're, Marcelo Garcia or Hodger Gracie, are you going to be able to call or text every single one of your students? Probably not.
No way.
So I think if it's, or, even Henzo Gracie, like these people have thousands of students and hundreds of thousands of followers, tens of thousands, whatever. And if you make your mission as an instructor to nurture every individual on that level, I think that's a beautiful thing. But I'm not, like, if that's your goal, then that's your goal. But I don't know that so many instructors make that their goal as it is. I want to live my life, have my journey, share my journey with you. And if you're inspired by it, then come along. I think once it's kind of like the parent that lives for their kid and doesn't live for themselves. I think that's an important distinction.
So now I like a lot of what you said, but for my school, because we're still so small, we only had 86 students. When someone, again, just because we're so close, because there's not so many of us, we all text each other. We have a lot of group messaging going on. If someone doesn't show up for a few days, they get a poop emoji.
Sure. I like your PG terminology there.
That's what it is. I send them a poop emoji and they know exactly what it is.
Yes. Well, I think that there is definitely a good amount of ball busting that happens at a small, like at a local level. But as your circles get bigger, your population gets bigger, it's not as easy to do, right? So if I do that with, let's say, my crew of 10 or 15 close training partners or staff at the school, then I also kind of hope that they have their influence on another 10 to 15 people a little bit away from me, maybe the way that I try to build the school that we have here is a little bit different than other people, but I want this very much to be seen as a community or a place that everyone can kind of gather and have the same interest to train. I don't want it to be about me. I don't want it to be about my business partner, Art, because I feel like having been through a lot of different schools, running schools, when there's a singular focus or a singular entity that everyone wants to answer to, sometimes everybody else becomes inconsequential, and I think we all have to be networked to make it work.
So everything you're talking about I've been reading a lot about leadership, and it's all spot on. This is what they do in the military. The term is span of control. There's only so many people directly you can have under you before it's unmanageable.
Yep.
So that's why you have a tiered system where there's people you trust below you, and there's people they trust below them. And so as the scale gets bigger, you can manage this amount of people. So we're still on a small scale, so he can individually text a certain amount of people. But what you're saying is right on. But the problem is, for Yanni, I'm one of his top students. So when I take breaks, it kind of affects the school a little more than if, maybe a new white belt took a break. So I should be on the mats. And I told him, just text me, because
I've been hounding Ed more lately. I tell him, I said, just train. Go to Yanni's, come here. As long as you're training, I'm happy.
But before this all happened, I was on a good 2020 started, and I did the New Year, New Me thing, and I was on a good pace. And now we're still doing all right, because
he's claiming 2021 is going to be his year.
2021, I'm going to be.
I put up an Instagram story the other day. I don't like. I don't like is maybe too weak of a way of saying it. I detest and hate cilantro.
Oh, cilantro. They were doing a study about that. How certain people, it like literally tastes like soap to them, and certain people it doesn't.
So I hear the soap analogy a lot, but I'm like, it doesn't taste like soap. It just tastes like, for lack of a better PG word, poop to me. It's gross. And I just posted a story because I follow an Instagram group called I Hate Coriander, or like I Hate Cilantro, and it said, if coriander was a year, it would be 2020. And I agree.
I don't know what coriander tastes like.
Well,
either do I. I know what cilantro tastes like.
I don't mind cilantro, but I know certain people.
I believe it's the same thing. It's just like a different.
Yeah, my wife hates cilantro, so I don't put cilantro on anything when I cook.
Well, she would murder you.
He does all the cooking too. He keeps telling me he's going to have me over for dinner, but it's never happened.
How about you invite me over? I said I would cook at your house.
Then I got to do the dishes. I want to come to your house. You cook. You do the dishes.
I don't do dishes. That's
I'm
one
a
of my
guest.
things. I cook. You clean.
That's why you
take care of me. So what you were saying about reaching down to maybe you have like 15 students that would then pass it on to someone else. Do you feel that takes place or eliminates cliques starting in your school?
No, I don't think you can eliminate cliques. I'm going to use the Canadian pronunciation of cliques.
Cliques?
I don't think you can eliminate that. I think that's natural human behavior. And I don't think I don't want to certainly impede or stop people from gathering with the people that they most like to gather with. But I think the way that you manage that is by sort of pulling people in on another level and saying, you guys all have your small groups. All these small groups make one group. We have another big group over here, and you sort of go up the ladder. I think it's natural. And I think what I've seen in a lot of jiu-jitsu schools, and I've made this differentiation before, that just because you're a multiple time world champion athlete or you're a high level athlete doesn't necessarily mean that you magically can open a school and you have great business management ideas and that you're an amazing leader. Those are three separate skill buckets. And I think I see a lot of people get frantic about seeing groups form underneath them, a little bit away from them, and they see that as maybe a way of people trying to take away or not be under their influence, and I think it's natural human behavior. The better way to is sort of like embrace it and think about how you can kind of streamline it so that the energy stays positive and it stays kind of going in one direction, and to not have things splinter and not have. I think when things splinter, it's when people feel that they're not being included. So the more inclusive you make your message or your base, the more those groups can grow and stay together. And I mean, we've been open a decade now, and we've had a relatively drama-free existence. And I think because we have a much more inclusive culture.
That's great. Now, do you feel that being a two-part owner and teacher, you and a man, do you think that helps with any of that?
I think it does. I mean, it's sometimes there's good cop, bad cop. Sometimes there's mom and dad. When a problem arises with a student, it's very interesting to see who they go to for what problem. A lot of dudes, I won't name any names, I'm just saying, a lot of dudes will come talk to me and I become mommy. I fix their problems.
See, now it's just me. I mean, Ed's there a lot and he teaches class, but I'm mommy and daddy. I don't mind. It's fun.
But sometimes, sometimes they go to art and I have to come down, or sometimes I hear about something and I tell Art, I'm like, if you don't do something about this, then I might say the wrong thing. So it's nice to have somebody to bounce your ideas off of and work with. I also just recently read an article that was really interesting. I can't remember where it came out in. It was talking about women who are the leaders of countries right now in the world and dealing with the COVID pandemic, that sometimes the countries with female leaders have sort of come out of this a little bit better. Like they were talking about Germany and New Zealand. And as I was reading through the article, I was like, that's interesting. Why would that be the case? Mind you, they're much smaller countries. But they also said that because women are minorities, that they tend to have a much more inclusive view when it comes to leadership, because they're not speaking from a point of power or position most of the time. So by being a little bit more thoughtful or considerate to the children or to an ethnic group or whatever it is, it can actually feel like you're getting the support of many more groups than speaking from a point of maybe male quote unquote privilege or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it helps.
You say, yeah, so like the different perspective, they'll have a different perspective.
They have a different perspective, and I think I would maybe even be so inclined to say that it's a wider perspective, because we've mostly started our journey in jiu-jitsu being the minority, being the other, being the outcast, being the, what am I supposed to do with this person? Like I don't think maybe there's a couple schools now that are catering specifically towards women, but I think in most schools, when you have a mixture of men and women, the women are not the majority. So you're always starting from a point of, well, I wish the changing room was a little bit bigger for us, or
right.
Man, I wish they would make gis in our size, So when you're the leader, you don't even think not to do that. You just go, let's create equal space changing rooms, or let's create merchandise for everybody.
This is good. This is going to get us on a positive topic here.
Go ahead, talk about it. Bring it up. Let me hear it.
How do you feel about excuse makers in your gym? People that say, oh, he's too big or he's too strong for me.
He's specifically pointing me out right now.
Because every time we roll and like I do well, he's like, oh, if you weren't so strong, I wouldn't be able to do this.
10 years younger than me and 100 pounds heavier than me.
Can you please tell him why this is wrong?
Are you sure this is going to put us on a positive track?
Yeah, because I love constructive criticism.
You said this was a positive podcast.
I love constructive criticism.
This might not be a positive conversation.
I can take it. Bring it. Let's see what you got.
Well, it's PG, right?
Yeah,
so
PG?
I've got to filter what I would like to say.
You can curse at me.
So it's funny. On Friday nights, we've been doing a competition theory class. And so we look at some breakdown of some competition footage, and then usually myself, and lately I've been inviting my my little friend Kurt Pellegrino on, and we banter about what it is to fight at a high level. Now, not everybody's ambition is to fight at a high level, but making excuses. I've heard it all. And I think most of my students know not to make excuses in front of me, because I'll usually stuff it back down their throat.
Maybe we should just start rolling in front of her so you can't make any of these.
I told you, I have a gi in the car. Do you want to commentate our roles for the podcast?
Oh, I would love that. I would love that.
Because, here's the thing. So I don't like to be at the front of the room and point my finger and wag my finger and be like, back in my time, or, I really dislike doing that. But there's times where I definitely want to do it. And I would actually say it might have been one of the reasons why I jumped out a couple of years ago and started competing again, because I see, the sport's grown a lot. I think in my time, when you started fighting 20 years ago, you had to be a little bit whacked out, and like you had to want to fight. You certainly weren't fighting because you were doing it for health and fitness. Like jiu-jitsu has become far more gentrified, and that's a good thing. But gentrification means to some degree that I don't want to say it's like watered down, but it could be less of an intense experience for everybody. And I think that when we are learning to become tougher skinned individuals, that ramp, that ladder looks very different for a lot of people. And jiu-jitsu really kind of brings your pain out, And so what I've seen a lot of people complain about, like, oh, I don't want to compete against that person because they want to bump me up into a division with somebody 10 pounds heavier than me. Or I don't want to train, like skirting the role with the upper belt. You know, maybe you have a blue belt that doesn't want to roll with the black belt, or the other way around, I should say, the black belt that doesn't want to roll with the up and coming blue belt.
For sure.
And it's kind of like in my time, you know, when the IBJJF came, they were doing purple, brown, and black belt divisions for women, like all 3 belt levels together. Could you imagine asking dudes right now, purple, brown, and black, all you guys are going to fight together?
At some local competitions, that's what happens for the Masters. I'm
okay.
So I'm Masters.
So you know that
I've
feeling.
done it. Yeah.
You know that feeling. And so I see a lot of people back away from it because it's not sort of their ideal conditions. But to that I say, man, if you're really as good as you think you are, you know, when you're off in a corner talking to everybody about how good you think you are, then just go train with everybody. You know, there can't be any excuse making. And it can't be any worse for you who's like let's say you're a 195 pound male who's 6'1". How much are you going to cry about it versus the 58-year-old lady that I've got who's 5 foot and gets crushed by everybody, but shows up for every class and just trains her butt off, you know?
See, now Ed likes to call me an excuse maker, but we're putting this for everyone to see. Ed and I have a challenge match, and I'm not going to make any excuses after I tap him out.
Okay.
He's definitely not going to win.
I'm going to win.
We've already talked. This is like a warm-up for me to get back. I want to get my feet wet with like a low-level opponent, and then
Do you compete?
I've competed I've had about 35 matches throughout. I'm a brown belt now.
That's a lot. 35 matches throughout?
Yeah. I'm not that good. I win half, lose half, but I know I could beat him. So that's what we're trying to do here.
We're going to put it out there, and after I tap him out, you're going to hear him making all the excuses. Oh, well, I wasn't ready for that. Yanni wasn't judging properly. He's going to make some excuse.
I don't ever make excuses. I complain. That's for sure.
Okay.
I'm a big time
complains.
complainer.
Complaining and excuses, 2 different things.
But they're very close. They're like cousins.
Okay.
Now, when Ed does tap me while we're rolling, I don't make excuses for it. Sometimes I can't get him off of me. And is that an excuse that I can't?
You should be able to get me off of you. You've been training 14 years. Get me off.
I can't sometimes. Everybody knows when you are on top, it's death. It's death.
True.
That's
not
it.
True. How many times have you moved an opponent off of you that's 100 pounds heavier? Or don't let yourself get there in the first place. He's letting me get to the point.
That is the key right there.
That's
unprofessional.
Dave's
That's
phone.
so unprofessional, Ed.
We've been doing this for
almost
2 months, and he still will let his phone go.
I forgot about it
today. You know, one
today.
thing that I think that's fun that I when I started training and I would come to New York City, 20 years ago, Henzo's school was on the 38th and 8th, I think it was. It was on the 5th floor of a building, and there was a methadone crack clinic like right below us.
I've heard many stories.
Yeah, no AC. At best, you had a few fans that were working, and we're talking like stinking hot New York City summer days, like 99 degrees outside, but inside it feels like 110.
I love that.
Days that it's like dangerous to train.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I used to go. I mean, how disgusting were we? We used to go. We'd train in puddles of sweat. This is when hygiene wasn't a thing. And you just take your gi off and you'd hang it on the locker, go home and wear it again the next day. Oh, gross. So gross. But we used to do that. And so now we're very fortunate that we have air conditioning in the school. But I am a big fan of just suffering through the heat. I kind of like it.
It's all these old school people. Jamie said the same thing. Ronnie does the same thing. Dave, you
I don't turn the air on ever.
It's like,
can we put it on like 75? That's pretty fine.
No.
But it trains your tolerance. No,
it is tough. Right?
And so, and like that heaviness in the air when people are like, oh, I can't breathe. I'm like, but you should learn to breathe through that. You should learn how to move and breathe through that. But people are very resistant to being uncomfortable when they have the privilege of not being that way.
That's why I do it, to make people uncomfortable. You have to get used to being uncomfortable. And I even think that I had a situation where it helped one of my students.
Oh, sure.
We never turned the air on. And we did Grappling Industries in Patterson last year. I think it was June of last year. And my student took first place. And I feel like it was because she was used to the heat.
Yeah.
There was no air conditioning.
Sometimes it's not even the heat. It's just the oppression, like the feeling of something oppressing you and overcoming that. So whether it's you got to fight 15 people, or it's blazing hot outside, or it's freezing cold, it just builds that inner resilience to help you fight through it.
Yeah, because when you're competing or even just rolling in the room, there's a physical aspect and the mental aspect is just as important. And what you're saying, it's more
100%.
I'd like to get back to the excuse maker right here for a second.
Where are you pointing to?
You. On the previous podcast, he has mentioned, we talked about seminars, how he likes to take seminars from bigger guys only. So that kind of...
I don't think I said only, but continue.
You said
you can go back and listen. You continue.
You prefer...
And why are you here? Yeah.
I prefer not to take seminars from little people.
Okay,
That's different.
he said that.
Go ahead.
That's basically
It's
the same
different.
thing.
Continue.
So that kind of... All right, mostly women are generally smaller than men. So that means that cuts the women out of it. Why would you want to take a seminar from a bigger, stronger man when you're having problems
I
dealing...
wouldn't go with a bigger, stronger man either. I feel the optimal instructor for you is someone that resembles your body type.
I disagree completely. We were just talking about perspectives. And if you're just going to go with somebody that has the same exact perspective as you, how could you get better?
He's pointing to Emily right now.
End of the round. I might hold the scorecard up 10-2 for Ed.
Yes!
What is going? I see a trend here. Did you talk to her before we came down here?
This is the first time we met.
So, gosh, there's a lot of ways that I could answer this.
Please, I love
there's
this.
a lot of ways we could go.
You're gonna have to find yourself a new host. All right?
You're going to get shamed out
So
of here.
to the point that he just made, it is just, we were talking about perspective, and he's right. It's just more of the same. Like, you're right in a way that like it.
How about if we just talked about beginners?
No.
Beginners.
Everybody needs
I'm
to...
still a beginner. In the beginning, you should train under someone that resembles your body
tell him
style
he's
because
wrong.
they'll give you the fundamentals better.
No.
How so?
I don't know. Go ahead.
He's wrong.
I'll just stick with my point
see,
until I can't anymore. Go ahead.
This is him in
Can't
real
back it up.
This is
You
him in
can't
real
back it
time.
up.
Yeah, he's in real time. He's trying to think. There's no reason. He never questioned this himself.
The gears are grinding.
So I've learned from a lot of different people over my career, and I like learning from different body types. Now, maybe you want to revise your question.
She's trying as hard as she can to help you.
She's going to save me.
Maybe you
Thank
want to revise your question. Is it better to learn from somebody around your body type most of the time? Maybe. Okay.
Perfect. I'll take it.
But
No, wait. No, but.
But I think that there's a lot to be learned from training with people that are much bigger or much smaller, longer and shorter, to see how they approach jiu-jitsu. So I have there's a black belt in a town in Michigan, Lapeer, Michigan, Dan Cousineau. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Who's had me out to his school a number of times. Dan is a former power lifter, I don't know how much he was when he was at the top of his ranks, but we're talking a big dude, a solid, muscular big dude, maybe mid 250, 300 range.
That's a big boy.
Okay, big boy. His school is full of really awesome dudes. I think it's sort of like a blue collar town. There are a bunch of dudes, the sweetest, most awesome dudes you could ever imagine. One girl from the school, and then a handful of women that come from other schools that'll show up for the seminars sometimes. And every time we finish the seminar and I go have dinner with Dan and his girlfriend and, some friends, I'm like, Dan, I don't get it, man. Like, why do you keep inviting me out here? And he said, because I've said to my guys, if the technique is working for you, how come it shouldn't work for people like us? When we have the advantage, when we're bigger, when we're stronger, why shouldn't we learn the more technical movements? Because it should certainly help people like us. Now, I can see on the flip side, you could say, oh, well, I've had people say, I'm so long or I'm so big, my body doesn't get into that position. But I would argue that the smaller you go, the more the technique has been battle tested at all levels. Because if the smallest person in the room is executing that guard pass or whatever, that sweep on somebody that's 100 pounds bigger than them, then that goes to show you that it will work at sort of every size, every level. I think that the problem we run into is when you're dealing with too much of the same, or what I say to my students is don't rest on your assets. When you get big dudes that play big dude jiu-jitsu and they want to show big dude jiu-jitsu to everybody in the room, that I think becomes problematic because people who are 100 pounds smaller than you or not built like you might not be able to apply them, put pressure on people the right way. When you're working with learning pressure passing or something like that from somebody that's much smaller, you know that it's got to be on point, because if their pressure is in the wrong place, they're going to go flying. They can't rest on their assets.
So now I'm sure that I contradict myself because I do
Yeah.
it all
Yes.
the time, all
Every
the time. But I bring people into my school all the time with different body styles to teach different things that maybe I don't teach or I'm not good at. And I feel that that kind of goes along with what you're saying.
Of course it does. I'm not saying for your school that you're that
Oh,
way.
yeah, for me.
But for you
Yeah,
specifically,
sure.
you're complaining about how you can't get me off of you or I'm too strong. Sure, somebody like Emily has great knowledge
Yeah,
to
you
give
know,
She
you
would
to deal with
stop
that.
you
It's
before you got there.
interesting.
Exactly.
Probably.
That's what
That's
you
what
should
I
learn from
need.
her. Yeah. So take a seminar from her.
You
That's what I'm
might
saying.
not.
I didn't not
you
turn-
might not be able to get him off you because maybe you're using similar big dude technique.
Exactly.
Versus if you had to use little person technique, it might be sneakier. It might off balance him more. It might do things that you don't have to do as a bigger person.
I definitely need more of that because I am the weakest person you will ever roll with. Tell her. She doesn't believe it. Tell her.
He's not that weak. He's making excuses.
I'm not that weak. You
You're-
tell me all the time. You definitely have to go back and listen to past
I'm
episodes.
stronger than you. Yes. So you compare yourself to me. I'm stronger. But you can't compare yourself to me. You got to
I'm
compare
comparing myself to my 9-year-old. I'm weak.
But that's not an excuse, obviously. So I'm trying to get him out of this mentality, and it's never too late to change your perspective or to grow
too late
in
for
general.
me.
No, it isn't.
It's too late.
You could always change, and that's what you're saying in one of your past podcasts is you don't force people to change, but you could lead by example. That's one of the big things that I took from listening to you talk in these podcasts is if you lead by example, that's the best you could do. You can't force somebody to change their pattern. I'm trying to lead by example. I want to come here, learn
You
from
better
Emily,
start
and then I'll
training,
come
all
and
right?
teach
Stop
you.
taking breaks. Stop doing all the bad things you're doing if you want to lead by example, okay?
But I think-
Maybe lose a little weight.
I think beginner's mind is super important. I think vulnerability is something that's really undervalued in everything that we do in leadership, like showing what you're not good at and showing your, like when your students or your audience puts you up on some sort of pedestal or they admire you to some degree, I think the greatest thing you can do as a leader is to show them that you struggle with things too.
Oh,
I show that all the time. I show everybody what I'm not
in
good
your,
at.
in your school for sure.
Every
But
day.
Even with this podcast, how many times you got to talk me off the ledge? I'm about to jump off a bridge because I'm
Oh,
I'm
man.
so
I love
critical,
it.
so
I do
self-critical
love it.
myself. And Dave's like, "What are you talking about? Of course we're gonna get Joe Rogan on our podcast."
I don't think I said that, but okay. That's a good example.
He shoots for the stars, and I'm like, I'm down here, so we
For
gotta-
everything. I
yeah,
shoot
so
for the stars
we
for
meet in the
everything.
middle. But what was the guy you talking about? The big guy. That takes a lot of humility to bring somebody like you in and say like, I don't have all the answers, and bring somebody and they have different kind of strategies, and that's what we need more of to take the ego out of it.
100%.
Yeah.
And I also like when this is kind of broaching into a bit of a different subject, and I don't want to pull away from it too much, but when we talk about women's equality in jiu-jitsu, I don't think women can be equal without having great men back us up. Like we need to have more people like that saying this person, this female is of value and we should learn from her, versus it always being you're relegated to teaching in the corner of the room. You're relegated to being the assistant for all the new women and children that come in. Like women and children are of equal value than all the men that walk in, but we need to show people that.
Of course. This goes into the next topic, which was you've been talking recently on podcasts how you don't have women's only classes, how you prefer mixed. And I think that's very interesting. And on one of the podcasts, they kind of push back on you a little bit as, oh, you're too far ahead. But why not lead by example? We just go into it and this is the class. And
Well, that's like your Joe Rogan, right? Like, I mean, I mean, whether or not it's too far ahead to me is irrelevant.
Right.
That's the reality that I would like to create for myself, for the rest of the world. I think we have successfully created it here. I do have, if you were to look at the demographics of my school, you could probably say that we fall in line with a lot of other schools. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but I would say 70 to 80% of our students are still men. But and then we have women making up the other portion of it. Majority being adult. We have a good kids program, but you have a female co-head instructor and co-owner. I think that's unusual, and I think that when I hear the need for women's classes, and people say, okay, but don't you think it's sometimes easier for a woman to come in and get started when they're with another group of women? Absolutely. But I also would argue if we're looking for inclusiveness, and is there someone like me that does it? Whether you're a man or a woman or an alien, whatever you are, when you show up, you look in the room and I know everybody does this. They go, oh, I thought I was going to be the only person like me doing this, but that guy looks like me too, or that person looks like me. She looks about the same age as me or the same build as me. You look for likeness. And I think when you have a woman teaching at the front of the room and a woman comes in to try class, to me, that gives just enough reason to start the class. It's an environment that's going to be built for you.
So then do you think, just someone like me, for example, I don't have an assistant or a female teacher at my school. Do you think that it would be easier for another woman to start class if there was a woman's only class?
Yeah, that can be the case. I mean, I think in smaller schools for sure, and there aren't a lot of female instructors. That's another topic that you could that you could get into if you want to, which is that women, I think, because there's less of us, our careers often get interrupted much earlier and much more frequently than that of a man's. So what I mean by that is if you were to take the average white belt female, average white belt male, put them into a room together, watch their progression over the next 10 years, it's far more likely that the woman will have been put into or asked to be put into a leadership position or a teaching position as a 4-stripe white belt, as a 3-stripe blue belt, as a purple belt, as a brown belt, to help guide other stray women that come through. While the man can just concentrate on training because there's a bunch of dudes, And it's not to say that one path is better than the other, but I find that women have had to play we have to play more roles most of the time coming up through the ranks than that of most men because there's less of us.
I agree with what you're saying, and I like the idea of him not having women's class still though, because he actually has 25% women in his adults class already, and we don't have any of those classes. And if they come up the ranks the same way as the guys do, maybe they will take a leadership role, but it'll be not based on what gender they are; it'll just be based on jiu-jitsu only.
Yeah, and I think that there are. First of all, I think when you see that in a male-led school, I think it's a really healthy indicator that the culture is pretty balanced. Like when I get people that are like, what should I look for when I go to a jiu-jitsu school? And it's a female asking. I'm like, go to a school and see if there's other women training. And even if the head instructor is a male, if there's like a thriving women's population there, it goes to show you that they're being treated with some respect or they're being valued because it's flourishing. Now, if you go to another school down the road and there's 2 women on the mat and 20 or 30 dudes, and those are the only 2 women in the school, and maybe they're running around with their thong underwear hanging out, and I've seen it all. Like you just might want to tap into a few different vibes to see what's going on. And I also see men change their tone with valuing women in their school if they have female children. I see that a lot. Like there's a Henza Gracie affiliate, Dave. I'm forgetting his last name. Yes, Warwick. I knew Dave from a long time ago when he was a purple belt, and he opened up his school and he reached out to me and asked me about how to develop a comfortable atmosphere to help women thrive in his school because he has a daughter. He's like, I want my daughter to feel comfortable here. And I think that's a really interesting perspective, right? Is I have a daughter and I want her to feel empowered in my school, in my space. I think that's super powerful. So I see that happening more, which I think is great.
This goes into the next topic. So I have 2 daughters, and Dave has a daughter that currently trains jiu-jitsu. And for me, my expectations are I would love my daughters to do jiu-jitsu at least enough to protect themselves. They don't need to become world champions, but from like 7 to 12, I'd really like them to get the muscle memory and learn it. That would make me very happy. And Dave already has his daughter in, and I think that for sure changes his perspective on the women in the whole scene.
I do love when I see her in class, and I mean, this can happen with anyone that has a daughter. It can happen with any girl, but my daughter, if we do King of the Hill takedown, sometimes will run through the whole line and take down every single boy with Osotogari. And in the back of my head, that makes me very happy to know that if anyone ever grabbed her, she would throw them without a second thought. That's the biggest thing for me. So I want all the girls in class to have that same confidence.
Could we ask what are your goals for your children? Like what do you...
Oh, but really, really similar to yours. I have 2 girls and now I have a boy. I feel sorry for the boy.
So you like the girls better? Is that what you're saying?
No, I just, his sisters are forces to be reckoned with.
Oh.
But at least now my husband has somebody else on his side other than the animals. So very similarly with the girls, I don't need them to compete. I don't need them to be world champions or make this their profession. But jiu-jitsu, I think at its heart has helped me feel a lot more empowered and comfortable in my body. And it's helped me feel capable. I think that's super important. women, with all the terrible things that could be going on as women come of age, I just don't think it's enough to do a self-defense workshop or 2 hours learning how to, karate chop somebody in the throat or pepper spray. When it comes to fight, flight, or freeze, it's a mechanism that's like burned into your, like, that's just who you are. And the thing that jiu-jitsu teaches you is how to take something that's, freaking you out psychologically and make your body move, condition it to do something. That takes practice. And I think that, the best type of self-confidence and the best type of self-defense is the invisible self-defense. I carry myself not like a victim. I don't look like somebody you want to attack. I'm very loud. I will probably drop you on your head and then scream. Like, these are the things that I want dudes to see when they think about having predatory behavior around me, It's actually always been a secret fantasy of mine to get attacked so that I could beat the crap out of somebody. It's never happened. But those are the things that I want for my kids, I want them to know with confidence that if they try to take somebody down, that they know how to do it because they've done it 100 times already on the mats. I want them to know that if they get pinned down somewhere and they don't want to be there, that they can safely get themselves out of the situation most of the time. It's not fail safe, right? Like, I can't say for certain that you're not going to have harm come to you, but can you better your chances of protecting yourself? For sure. Can you, I think the other thing that happens with jiu-jitsu is you spend so much time touching people. I do feel like there's some sort of sensitivity that starts to develop where, if I go into a party with like 200 unknowns, I can just start to sense people's energy from, 10 feet away. I kind of don't like the way that person feels to me. I kind of don't feel safe with these people. That group, let me go hang with those people. Their energy is way better. There's a sensitivity that I think we start to earn when we work with so many people and work with and have other people's energy flow through us. I think that that's super important too.
Yet you let us in the room.
I thought you were going to say something like profoundly.
I don't have anything profound going on.
That's such an interesting thought, the way you put that, because as you know, when you train no-gi, sometimes you go to a school you've never been to, or you roll with somebody you never, as soon as you touch them, you know how good they are. Mm-hmm. You could just feel it. And that you bring it to another level with the energy. And now that I think about it, of course, I don't want to be near anybody that's aggressive. I've never gotten in a fight my whole life because I don't want to be in a fight. If you think you're tougher than me, you're right. You're tougher than me, and I'll go this way because I don't want to be part of that. And it's so, I never thought about it that way, the energy part of it. And people definitely will feel that because you're putting them under stress. Like you said, like if there's no air conditioning, you're trying to do technique, you're trying to think and do this under pressure. And you don't get that in real life.
We don't train for unideal circumstances. We don't train for pressure. We don't train for chaos. We don't train for discomfort. I think these are the real gifts that jiu-jitsu gives us. Is it helps us train under pressure for anything. It makes you more why do people get addicted to jiu-jitsu as grown adults? I don't think it's because they know how to just choke somebody. I really think it comes down to it allows me to express myself under pressure in a physical and psychological way. And I think that is something that more humans need to do because we just don't do it enough. And a lot of us are in sheltered existences where everything is catered to us. We're in position of privilege. Things are catered to us. Things are comfortable. Things are convenient. That's not real life, man. When somebody comes after you or something goes wrong, you're going to fall apart.
This is not in the same direction that we're going, but it's popped into my head 3 or 4 times, and I don't want to forget this thought. Since you've started training, so you've been training for about 20 years, you said, right? Mm-hmm. So since you've started training, I was just wondering if you have seen an increase in the amount of females training jiu-jitsu or if the percentage has always stayed the same, but now there's more people overall training.
It's a very good question.
That actually came from one of our female students, Jess.
Did she ask that specifically?
She did ask that question.
No, I came up with it.
No, you did not.
All right, Jess, good job.
It's a really good question. I think... So when I started, most of the places that I started in had like 10 or 20 students, or it was somebody's dirty dungeon basement. And I would say that it has increased. I think the overall percentage has increased a little bit, but to her point, I don't think it's increased as much as we think it has. I would say on average when I was training, if there were any other women to be seen in a population of 100, it might be 1 or 2. Now, if you go into a school with 100 students, depending on the culture, you might see that number be 4 or 5. If the culture is very healthy, it might be 20 or 30, but I think I think what's happened is we have more diverse representation at the top. So I think that helps. And that's allowed for women to grow. And men we're different creatures. I don't think we thrive under the same circumstances most of the time. I've said to many people, for me to become a black belt and to have continued training as long as I have, anyone in my generation or older or around there, we're slightly... Something's not right in the head.
I would say with everyone that does jujitsu, there's something wrong somewhere. A little bit off.
Maybe.
We have to be.
Maybe. But I think to take it to the limits that some of us in my generation have, like when we didn't have anybody else to look up to, or when the person that we had to look up to was like a fable told by somebody else, because before social media your reputation preceded you because you heard about these people, and at the time the only person I ever heard about was Leka Vieira, and actually when I moved to the States, a young woman in California named Erica Montoya, but your reputation preceded you, and it was a very cruel and unkind landscape. Like if you didn't adapt to your environment, you were just chewed up and spit out. That's not really the case anymore. I think we've learned enough that we try to make it somewhat more welcoming and palatable for females to come in,
Did you ever go through a time in your head where you thought about quitting?
Oh yeah, brown belt.
Was it female male thing, or was it
No, it was more so I was under a lot of psychological stress with the team that I was training with, and the person that made me feel the worst about myself was a female, but she didn't train jiu-jitsu. But she planted a seed in my head that made me stop believing in myself, and then that made me feel like I should just quit jiu-jitsu. Because at the end of the day, like, I started jiu-jitsu because it was fun. And it wasn't fun for me anymore. I would get on the mats, and I distinctly remember slapping hands with my training partner. And my training partner was a great dude. And I just started crying. And he was like, "Oh my God, are you okay? Is everything okay?" And I said, "Everything's fine." And he goes, "Should we stop?" And I said, "No, just keep training." And I just cried while I trained. And I got off the mats, and then I didn't step back on them for about 2 or 3 months. Because I didn't believe in myself.
That's tough. That's kind of goes back to what I was saying, like the judgments. If you let them in, like they can corrupt you and make you think things that you don't really believe in. But if you even just question yourself, that's the rough part of it.
It is. And I think, the person who I was roughly 10, 12 years ago is not who I am now. I've certainly learned a lot. And I've learned a lot about this thing that we do to ourselves, which is that our minds will want to make meaning out of everything. And that's not always reality. Like that's not always what's actually happening. But if we sit in our head and we allow somebody to influence us in a negative way, and we carry that story on, and we create this big hypothetical story of why everybody hates us or why this has happened, we completely lose sight of what really happened in reality, And if the further we get away from the actions and the more we get into our head, the worse we can make the situation.
Yeah, I'd like to tell you a story from a male perspective. So when I was 18,
no stories, please.
No, I already told this, but when I was 18 years old, I was a young, hungry kid. I saw UFC on TV, and I was like, I want to fight. I want to be Chuck Liddell, and I want to beat up people. So I get into school, and 3 months I'm training. I'm pretty good white belt. I can beat up other white belts, and now I get to roll with a female. She's got a blue belt with stripes on her. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get this girl, and I was going for blood, and that's my mentality back then. I didn't look at anybody else's perspective. I was only looking for my perspective. I didn't think about how it would affect her. She wasn't a young woman either. She was, in her mid to late 30s. And now that I have grown as a person, and I've rolled with children, and I've rolled with the women, I have a completely different perspective. And I'd like you to kind of touch on that. It's okay to have one perspective, and then you can grow as a person instead of, some people mention kicking these people out of the community and stuff instead of trying to help them grow, because you can grow.
I don't think kicking people out, this is petty, but it happens on Facebook all the time. Like, sometimes I'll post something that's controversial, or sometimes I'll post something that's totally flippant and somehow it becomes controversial. I don't know. And then people sound off. And I've had a few instances where people have said, you should kick this person, you should delete this person off your Facebook. They're being really rude and inconsiderate of other people's perspectives, or this isn't, we just think that this is a negative presence. And I never kick that person off, because I I don't think we further ourselves by doing, it's become a trendy thing these days, like cancel culture. Like just getting rid of the problem is not actually ever getting rid of the problem. And I think it just comes back in a worse form, So I feel like the better thing to do is sometimes to embrace and hear that person out and like understand, if you can, on a deeper level, why do they feel like that? Like that's the first time I've ever heard a man admit that they go for blood when they've trained with a woman. Granted, it was a younger you, but it's really funny. Like I always notice that men train with you. There's like usually 2 buckets that they fall into when they first train with a woman. One is they go way too easy because they don't want to hurt you, so they don't know what to do. And then the other one is that they go way too hard because I could be wrong, but I feel like maybe they perceive a threat. I can't let a woman tap me out.
For sure.
So then they just go nuts.
I've been both of those men, and now I'm in the middle now.
And so you have to learn to calibrate yourself. But I don't think we learn anything by saying, dude, that was crazy. Get the heck out of my gym. Because you don't know any better. And that's your truth. Like that's your story. You're learning. You don't know. So is it more productive? Are you trainable? Are you like, do you have an open mind? Will you take a perspective when the teacher pulls you aside and says, look, that's not the best way to train with, like you training with a woman, she's not going to be as strong as you, but you should really look at this as like a technical match and take your strength out of it. It could be a really good tool. That is where I think we move the needle a bit forward. But a lot of people are not that tolerant. And I think a lot of leaders don't really have the patience or the insight to see how they can lead in that direction. So yeah, I agree with you.
So we got so Jess that gave you the question, she wrote down something that oh my God. I try to include him and try to do a balance.
I think I'm jumping in pretty good.
So this is what Jess said. This is a quote for it. To me, there is nothing more gratifying than being able to tap out a guy who is twice my size and that feeling of panic that comes over them when they know it's about to happen. Have you ever had that kind of perspective? Like you could see the fear in them.
It sounds to me like she's being a bully. Jess, we're going to have to talk about this.
Women can have the same hunger for it too, because you know how it is. When you're early and you're not that good yet, people will, maybe you roll with me. That she rolls with me. I'm that guy when I'm 18 years old and I'm crushing her. But now I took too many breaks and she's ahead of me, and now she's beating that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be lying if I said that when I train with some of my male training partners, whether they be my husband or otherwise, that when I legitimately get a sweep or I legitimately do something that I don't go, yes, that totally worked, or that was awesome. In my brain, it's usually, wow, that technique worked, because I always feel like I'll be, stacked against a male training partner who is going to be stronger than me. Even if they're not bigger than me, they're generally stronger than me. And I think it proves why jiu-jitsu works. But that type of competition or that competitive feeling, I don't think that goes away from anybody, because you're fighting. We don't show up and train jiu-jitsu and spar so that we can lose and feel good about ourselves.
So you're a fine art. You went to fine art school, right? Mm-hmm. My father went to fine art school as well, so I kind of have a little bit of his creative energy, and I feel like in jiu-jitsu you get to spend that energy by how you project your game, because everybody's game has a little bit of their uniqueness, their personality in it, and I think that's something that people might not realize that they're missing during this long break that we have, that they have this creative energy pent up that they're not getting to use.
So really, it's a great point. It's funny, when I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was still in art school, and I got into painting these gigantic abstract expressionist paintings. They were huge, the size of doors and walls. And when I finished school, I no longer had this luxurious studio space. My parents didn't want that in their garage. And I took up jiu-jitsu and I just ran away with it. And when people say, well, do you miss art? And there are certainly points in my life now where I think I would like to create a visual object, like an artifact, if you will. But I do tell people that I think jiu-jitsu took over my creative energy, and it became performance art in some way for me, because it was a way of activating my body. So yeah, absolutely. Like when I'm not, I started taking up archery when we got locked down, because I was like, I need something to focus my mind on, So for sure.
You got to start your own podcast. Why don't you have a podcast yet?
Oh, believe me, there's so many. Because like Emily Kwok needs another job.
I have heard how busy you are on a previous podcast, and you have kids, you have the gym here, and you also have a full-time job.
Yeah.
Now you could fit a podcast in there.
Yeah, no, so I do. And that's not even to like, and I'm not like a huge, like I'm on social media, but I'm not like obsessed with social media. But that also doesn't account for all the people that will contact you through social media or email asking for something else, right?
Sorry.
So people like you. So yeah, so I have 3 small children. I don't know if it gets easier when they're slightly older.
It definitely
All
does.
right, I have a question for you because I have 2 daughters, and my wife we're both on the fence. Do we take another shot? She really wants a boy. I don't care. I'm good with 2, but she really wants to take the chance. I'd be okay with having 3 girls. That's fine with me as well. But it's so much responsibility. Like another child in the world. Every child is just this burden of responsibility that is never lifted.
True.
What do you think I should do? Should I just shut it down, or should I go for 3?
Now, he asked me to play the heel, and he's got to shut it down.
I didn't ask you that.
There's no right time and there's no wrong time. I think it's just it's what happens. It's what you guys really like. If you the way I feel about it is there's no amount of money you can save or preparedness you can have to make sure that your children are going to last beyond your years, right? Because at some point when we go, we won't know what happens to them. I think the best thing that we can do, whether you're going to have 1 child or 10, is if you prepare them to be thoughtful, responsible, progressive thinking human beings and just hope for the best, you know? And I'm not a millionaire. I mean, maybe one day I will be, but right now I'm not. And I think all the time, I'm like, oh, do I have enough for my children? Can we do this? Can we do that? There's certain things that I want for my family, and I try to make sure that I can provide those things. But beyond that, I just want them to be good people. And I didn't want the 3rd one. It was an oops. Like,
Ooh.
oh no. I found out on Mother's Day last year, and I cried uncontrollably for hours. And my husband was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm pregnant." And he was shocked. And I really had a hard time coming to terms with the 3rd pregnancy because I had just gone back into competition. I had just reclaimed my body. I had just started my life again. And I'm also a parent who believes very firmly that I can't be a good parent if I don't demonstrate to my children what my life is for myself. And so it was hard for me to get over. So the 3rd kid, I feel like I pumped out like super fast. The timeline was fast. I kept myself in good shape. I pushed him out in 3 pushes, and then I was back at it, you know? And what's really nice, I have to say about the 3rd one is I feel like I can actually enjoy and appreciate a baby, because with the first one, you're like, everybody's worried, right? Like, oh, did I do it right?
Yeah.
Can we go to bed? Can they eat that? You know? And you're on edge the whole time that child is alive. The second one you thought would be a great idea. And then you realize how much more complex life becomes.
It's more than double. It's not double. It's more than double.
Somebody said it to me best. You think it's an incremental responsibility, but it's exponentially harder, right? And so the second one, I think you're just like freaking out yourself because you're like, oh my God, the second child's just going to be a loss. You know, like what are we going to do? The third one, you kind of know the chaos of everything. And the house could be burning down, but you're like, oh, you're smiling and you're chubby. Life is good.
Well, another thing I'm worried about is being able to spread my love. You know, you can only put so much on each one, and then as they get older, the time spent, or maybe this one goes here, this one goes here. I want to be able to spread my love evenly over them. I feel like 3 really.
And he already says he has a favorite.
Oh.
And he tells her.
There's nothing I can do about it. It's the feeling I have. My wife likes the other one, so they're good. 1 and 1.
I do, you know, when I had my first and I was about to have my second, I went through a period where I kind of lamented our single child relationship because I could do everything with her. And my oldest is actually the most responsible. She's a really sweet, thoughtful girl. She takes care of everybody else. And, you know, the other day we had this really nice picnic. I took them to go see these eagles that have nested close by. And it was just me and the 3 kids. My husband was doing yard work. And we had a really beautiful afternoon. The girls loved being together. Like, I played card game with the girls. And we had a picnic. And they looked after their baby brother. It was kind of a beautiful thing. And what I love about it is the richness that having each of those personalities around gives me in my life, you know? So I think you can do it. I think you can do it. It's just there's more love to go around.
I think that you need to get to know Ed a little bit more before you start recommending he continues to reproduce.
That's the meanest thing you ever said to me.
What do you mean?
You don't think I should
I'm
bring
just
another
keeping it
one
real.
in?
No, you should not bring another one into this world.
He's been telling me
You've
that for
been
months.
lucky.
I've been going back and forth in my head. Like a couple months ago, I was like, all right, 100%, we're doing it. And I wanted to live my life like I
But I
like it was
supported you when you said that.
But now I'm like,
Now you definitely
now
shouldn't. You're
you
questioning
you
it.
have a rough day with the two kids, and you're like, I'm like,
How old are they?
3.5 and 2.
Oh yeah. I
So
mean that's
so we're about to like, I'm like I could see. I could see the end of the tunnel right now, and I'm like, my wife's name is Meg. Meg, we're almost there. Your body's back from the pregnancy. You're completely good. They're about to both be in school in a couple years. We'll have more time to ourselves. You really want to start? It's like starting over again. You're starting a video game all over again, starting from the beginning, and it's extra pressure. And my house isn't big enough to handle all this. Do you really want to go through this? Especially when they're both giving us a hard time.
and she's like, yes.
She won't let, like, because I'm thinking about, getting snipped, but that's finality. So I'm like, do you really want me to do this? And she's like, no, don't do it yet, because she's not sure.
So here's a good thing for you. So when I had my second, and I want to say your timeline's interesting because my children are 4 and 6, and I was what I would consider to be out of the woods when I found out I was pregnant with my third. No more diaper bag. Like no more diaper bag.
Right. I just
toilet
threw out my
train.
diaper genie.
It was
It's gone.
amazing. It was amazing. I was taking 1-week trips by myself to Costa Rica. I mean, it was amazing. My doctor said after my second, she goes, so Emily, this is their first postpartum checkup. She goes, what do you want to do about birth control? And I was like, well, and she goes, well, you're not done. And I said, what are you talking
Just the
about?
pause,
I'm not
right?
done.
The pause.
And she said, you're not done. I'm like, no, I was just going to say I don't. And she goes, no, you're not done. And she's like, it doesn't mean that you're going to have another, but it means that you're not done. And she said, people who are done know that they're done. And I was like, really? And I know this feeling now because because when I found out I got pregnant with the third, I was like, oh my God. And I was like, no more.
Yeah, now you're done for sure.
So the fact that I don't hear that in your voice and that your wife is certainly on the team of like, let's have another.
She's not necessarily on the team. She's on team. Don't make a final decision.
Okay, so then you guys aren't done.
All right.
You still gotta hang
convinced me.
out.
She
Gotta hang
convinced
out
me.
and figure that out.
Can I back up a little bit here, though? 'Cause you had mentioned that your wife lost all the pregnancy weight. I was just wondering when you're going to.
She gave it to me. She took the weight and she gave it to me. I got it all now. I'm holding it for the both of us. No, actually, I did lose some weight last year. We both lost it together. It was fun. We did a competition against our friends, and we won easily. But then, I was like, all right, competition's over. Let's party. And I did. I gained 25 pounds back.
So do you have any ideas for me to get Ed motivated? He's only 30, and he's good at
He's
jiu-jitsu.
so young.
I think that he could really still make a run. Even he doesn't have to go for worlds or anything, but he can make a real run for some competitions. He can lose some weight. He can make a little bit of a name for himself, but he thinks that he's past his prime already.
It's not past prime. It's just perspective. It's goals. What does it take to go into that competition mode?
I didn't even say worlds. Remember,
I'm
no
not saying
worlds.
worlds. Any competition, you want to be ready. It's time away from the family. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Time away from the family. Okay, here we go. This guy, he only works 2 days a week. He's a fireman. He has nothing but time.
Why does he do this to me? Why is he?
I'm trying to shame you into training more.
You know what? This is kind of a tricky spot for him to frame you in because my husband was a firefighter. He just retired.
Oh, he retired?
Mhm.
Fantastic.
He worked for Trenton, and he retired with 27 years on the job.
God bless him.
But he was working 24 hours, 3 days off.
That's what it is.
And sometimes I was like, yo, dude, what are you doing with your 3 days off?
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
You know what Ed does for those 3 days off? He edits a podcast for 3 days. They come out
So
fantastic.
you might sacrifice your podcast if we put Ed down this path.
Exactly. I'm not.
I would rather your jiu-jitsu improve.
This is so much easier.
No, because you could up my level.
I'm barely sweating right now.
But I mean, I guess it's like, what do you want? I mean, is that something that you want? Like competition, though I would wish that all students get to experience it once or twice, it's not everybody's jam. And like some people just don't have the need to be the best at it, and if it's not your need, then that's fine. But when we do set or orient ourselves towards a very specific goal like that, I do think it brings a lot of things into focus and it makes it easier to climb that hill, right? Like when you don't have a purpose or a focus and then you're like, oh, I'm going to try and lose 20 pounds. For me, like, so I'm sitting with like the last 5 pounds of my baby weight and I'm like, I need to get rid of it. But my training schedule is obviously not what it normally would be. So yeah, like sometimes the idea of, oh, well, if there was a competition to train for, how much better would it be?
We already got a match lined up. Listen, I'm going to take it one step at a time. Step 1, dominate Dave, embarrass him in front of his family. All right? We'll come to step 2 when we get there. We're not there yet.
Do you like competition?
I actually love competition when I'm in shape, which for all 35 matches, I've probably been in shape for maybe 5 of them.
Interesting. So maybe this is a goal. So here's the thing. We like to take, I mean, we're not doing it this year, but usually we take an annual trip to the Masters. There's a bunch of students that will compete. And we did this for a few years, and then it actually made me feel like, well, if I'm going to live it up at the Wynn and go, coach everybody and go to the spa, maybe I should earn my keep and compete next year. So then I decided to get my act together and do it. I'd never done Masters at that point, right? Because Masters was a newer tournament from, what I used to compete in. So it was a good excuse to sort of focus the laser and get in there and have some fun. So maybe that's what you should do. 2021. Ed goes to Masters Worlds live podcast. Goes into what you'd be Masters 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fine.
And then you go live it up after you win.
I just want to win. Listen, this is what I really want to do. I feel embarrassed that I don't have a black belt yet because my instructor Yanni, he's very nice, and he doesn't, bother me about it. But he's never going to give me the belt unless I earn it, which I have to earn it.
What does he feel like you need to earn?
He needs to decrease.
I got to show up on the mat. I'm not.
Really?
What do you say?
No.
No, it has nothing to do with the weight. The weight will come off when I start training.
Yeah.
My problem is I take breaks, I come in. I take breaks,
So
I
he
come
wants
in.
to see more discipline.
He wants to see me disciplined, and he loves to see me compete as well. So my goal is to lose the weight, get in shape, compete. I have to compete. I'm not going to be able to get the belt if I don't compete. For myself. He'll give it to me if I show up on the mats, but he would also like me. It's the same thing you're saying. You don't have to compete, but competition is going to...
And does he see the discipline, like, does this have to occur over a period of time? Because what if you just decide to discipline yourself for a year so that it's enough to show him that you deserve the belt, and then as soon as you get it, you're like, peace out?
It won't be that. It's going to be more...
Yanni could sniff it out for sure.
I don't know what goes through his head. I have no idea how he gives belts out. I've been trying to figure it out, but...
That should be a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's a different thing. But I'm just trying... I think it's going to take me about 2 years of commitment. I'm going to give 2 hard years of commitment, and then we'll see where we're at. It's not really ultimately about the belt. My goal for my jiu-jitsu life right now is to win 1 black belt match. So I need to get ready for that match over time. I don't have, it's not a big goal, but I would like to earn it. I've been a brown belt for 4 years because I'm lazy. It's just laziness. And Yanni hasn't given out
any...
This
is self-admitted laziness?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And he hasn't given out any black belts
Is this
yet.
like your vice? Like, are you generally lazy with a lot of things in your life? Or just jiu-jitsu?
I order a Domino's pizza, and I'm like, I'm not going out now. I ate the whole thing.
So it's self-discipline.
Yeah, it's all discipline. I have a discipline problem.
That is why it took me so long to get him to do this podcast. I can't push him along with everything in life, but I am trying real hard to push him along in the jiu-jitsu. I pushed him along with the podcast. I'm working on pushing him in the jiu-jitsu.
But you know what's fun is I take 2 months off, and I come back, and I dominate him. It's funny to see the look on his face that I could take all this time off and still do well.
I hate you. Please don't edit that part out. Leave that in. Make it louder.
Can you just say love real quick?
Love.
There you go.
Right. So if you can't tell, we have a lot of fun doing this. We're obviously good friends. Most of this is just for good humor. But I am going to really beat him when we have this match. It's going to be on YouTube. You'll be able to see it. And then,
well, wouldn't it be interesting if you hunkered down and started fine-tuning and sharpening all of your jiu-jitsu skills with the sole purpose of being able to beat him regardless of whether it was in competition or when he just decides to show up and train again? That your mission is just to put a smackdown on him, and he not being able to mentally take that would spurn him to become a more
I wouldn't quit. I would not quit.
He would quit. Listen, there was a group of people that all got their blue belts at the same time that Ed got his blue belt, and Yanni had to give Ed the belt first because he knew Ed would stop training if he was
My blue belt
last.
is similar to what I'm going through right now. It took me 3 years to get a blue belt because I would show up, not show up, show up, not show up. And I was ready for it, and he was about to give it to me, and then I took 6 months off. So he kind of punished me for it. I was more than ready for it. That's why he gave it to me first. But I don't know where I was going with that. You got me off. Oh, yeah.
So
no.
Now,
Wait a second.
You wait a second.
No, I found it. If I lose any match I've ever won or lost, you can see it on the videos because Yanni's got all the videos in his computer. I've shaken the person's hand. I'm not the kind of guy that slams the mat after I win or lose. I shake them hand, and you couldn't even tell if I lost. If you looked in the match, you won't even tell.
You already said that you were going to re-challenge me if I was to beat you.
I would re-challenge you.
And you also said that if you beat me, you're going to spike the football.
For sure. But that's for fun. If you beat me, that probably would be the best thing that ever happened to me. It would drive me so hard. I would I would probably try to be a world champion just to beat you, just to rub in your face. And I also have a challenge match against his son 9 years from now. I'm going to beat him too.
And I tell him all the time, I'm like, listen, you're going to be in my condition 9 years from now, although
You're in
maybe
good shape.
not.
You're in better shape than I am right now. So
Yeah.
what is that saying?
You're going to be too slow for him in 9 years.
That'd be
all
fine.
right?
I would love
But
if
now,
your son beat
Emily,
me.
I liked your idea of getting ready so that whether it's the challenge match or not, that I could dominate Ed. Are you willing to help me with that?
How can I help you?
I'll come down here and train every day.
Do it.
He can't do that. You have a school to run.
Well, I'm going to do it now during the times where we're not training.
You know, she has a DVD series you could watch.
Defeat bigger, stronger opponents.
There you go.
Oh, you know what we could do? I do this virtually with some people. You can film yourself training with people, and we could do a virtual private.
That's
So
good.
you don't
and
want me
then-
coming down here
And then
training
I
in person?
could, no, you could do that too, but
Oh,
I
all
could
right,
just
okay.
look at, since you have responsibilities, all I'm saying, sometimes it's a very helpful tool to look at your own training so that you can break down what you do and don't do and build your skill set. And then we could watch footage of Ed and we could say, these are the things that he does and doesn't do. Let's figure your game out.
He knows
so
what
that-
I do.
Yeah, I know exactly.
He knows
what
exactly
does.
what I do.
Okay.
That's one of the problems with him. He can't stop it anyways. I only have 3 moves.
Well, so
I
then
stop
you,
it
so
half
then
the
you
time.
need to get better at doing what you do and forget what he does.
yeah, forget what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
No, please. It's all planned out. All he has to do is pull guard, and the rest will come together on its own.
He's going to try to footlock me. We already know. He's going to
Oh
try
no, that's been crossing my mind lately, but that wasn't the plan.
What is the plan? Just tell me real quick.
I can't tell you.
He's got to keep it. All right, so we're about to wrap this up, Emily. Just for the future, though, we'll end on this. What do you think the future for women jiu-jitsu in general? Do you think it's on the rise still? Like, have we peaked with the amount of people that are doing it, or is there room for growth?
It's a good question because it is kind of, I'm going to use the Canadian pronunciation. It's a niche sport. Americans like to say niche.
Did you say schedule?
No, I say schedule. No. I don't know if jiu-jitsu is ever going to become mainstream, like to the point of like UFC mainstream. Few different reasons why, but one of them being that I think it's kind of like looking at an abstract painting. If you're not educated in understanding what jiu-jitsu looks like, it's not very fun to watch.
For sure, we were talking about that.
It's awful. And actually, I don't even like watching jiu-jitsu if the competitors aren't fighting to win. It's pretty terrible to watch people just stall it out for 9 minutes.
No, we've actually been talking about rule set. Actually, what do you think about this rule?
This is interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
So crucifix, we were thinking about making it 1 point for crucifix position. What do you think about that?
Why?
I just think it deserves a point.
It's a good position. Do you think having someone in the crucifix is not
You could finish
dominant?
a couple different ways from there.
Arms completely isolated.
Chest on the back on the chest. If the back's on the floor, you don't get the point.
Yeah, maybe.
She's kind of iffy. People are iffy on
All
that
right.
one. How about this?
This one is good.
I've been trying to do this one for 10 years. You have seatbelt grip, chest to back, hip to hip. Each hook is 2 points. So you put a hook in, you get 2. You get the other hook, it's 2.
Yeah, possibly. Because I think when you have one hook, it still leaves you open to, like, you can still do a lot of
Yeah, it's
damage
still
with
very
one
dangerous there. Yeah.
hook. Yeah, that could be an idea.
All right, now this is the last one. This is my most important because this is what drives me crazy the most. Standing. You are not allowed to take a step backwards like in wrestling. You take a step back, you get a disadvantage. To kind of promote more judo and less stalling.
So what happens with people who guard pull?
No, guard pulling, well, that's
Still
another thing.
allowed. He's
no,
still
I
allowing
think a
it.
guard pull should be 1 point for them because you scared them. Your stand-up scared them so much, you get the point because they pulled.
Interesting.
Just to open up it. Not every tournament. I think it would just do a special tournament with kind of rules to open up this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too is black belt matches. Now that I'm a masters 2, it's 5 minutes, not 10. I think when I look back at my 10-minute matches and I look at my 5-minute matches, 5 minutes makes you move a lot more.
Right, you're trying to pace yourself with 10, especially if you have a bunch of matches.
So it's like, why do we have 10-minute matches at the black belt adult level at IBJJF tournaments? I don't know. So I mean, I think a lot of things could be altered, but yeah. So to answer your first question, if you're talking about women's growth, I think we definitely have a lot of room to still grow, and I think we will. As for the sports growth, it's going to grow maybe more globally. I just don't know that it's ever going to be a super popular mainstream sport.
Well, the reason I bring up the points at all is because, like you were saying, even for you, jiu-jitsu, I mean, me too, I haven't watched jiu-jitsu that much because sometimes
It's awful.
you can go to sleep watching it.
Sometimes I actually watch the fights and I'm like, you should be ashamed of yourself.
I thought we were doing no judgments here. That's a judgment.
We spoke with Jamie Cruz about this, and we talked about double guard pulling, and he didn't even understand that it was a thing.
That's what I'm saying. If you promote people to do more stand-up oriented things, give points to the other person for you sitting, it'll promote more judo, because there's not as much judo as there should be, I think, in jiu-jitsu, because judo is a huge aspect.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because when you watch like ADCC was really exciting this year. I mean, granted, maybe it's more exciting because everybody's doing steroids. I mean, that was impressive too. But I mean, you have a lot of different grappling styles involved. You know, and there's more judo, and there's more sambo, and there's more wrestling, and there's lots of things going on. And I'm not quite sure. I mean, the IBJJF does have this sort of purist tradition, and it is controlled by a private entity, despite what we'd like to think about it. Maybe that has something to do with it. You know, that it's not that it's a lot more tightly woven, and that certain norms are set in a way that we can't really change. I'm not sure, but I don't think jiu-jitsu is at a level where it's going to be appreciated per se at the Olympics, or that it could be televised. I mean, not for nothing, but during this quarantine, my daughter the other day came up to me. She goes, "Mom, I want to watch this TV show." And I'm like, "What TV show is it?" They've created a TV show around competitive miniature golf. I mean, it's a thing. People also watch bowling, and they watch dart throwing. And I mean, okay, dart throwing, I guess, could be exciting with the amount of focus, but it's like there are a lot of sports that are questionably less active and maybe less exciting than jiu-jitsu. Nobody wants to watch jiu-jitsu.
Well, let me push back a little bit, because I've been watching a lot of Sesame Street.
Okay.
And there was this little girl on there, and they asked her, you know, what do you do for fun? And she mentioned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So just the fact that it's getting on the mainstream platform like Sesame Street, I think that's a good sign that we're headed in the right direction.
Sure. I think we could be headed in the right direction, but just as easily steered off the right direction. There's a lot of, you know, the one thing I wish would really change in jiu-jitsu is if there was some sort of non-corrupt collective board or federation of people that looked at all people's interests and growth in the sport versus everything be so privately held. I mean, I feel like, you know, I feel like there's not a lot of unity, and maybe that'll be exciting. Maybe to see, like, you know, there's been a lot of no-gi, gi, IBJJF, all these different fight promotions. Maybe we're in an age right now where there's just a lot of enterprise happening around jiu-jitsu. But it's kind of, I feel like if we're not careful, it'll stagnate, or it'll just kind of internally combust.
Well, America has become kind of the epicenter of jiu-jitsu. I mean, mind you, we have Brazilians that are mostly still running the schools at the top, but then you have guys like Keenan Cornelius that are trying to build their own brand. You have Eddie Bravo, who's got his own tournament. So if you have more guys like Eddie Bravo that start to, you know, push maybe some of our gi ideas.
And flat earth agendas, yeah, that too.
Not all of his agendas are good. But I think the Americanization of it might help push it, because we're always trying to be the top anyways, and we're starting to get more and more American champions. And then 2007,
when they brought the IBJJF Mundials to America, was the first year. I was working for Gracie Magazine, and I was a brown belt, and I was prepared to go to Brazil that year to compete. And then Luca Atala said, "No, not necessary. They're going to come here." And that was the year that I competed and I won. And I remember you could say like the political climate at the time was, well, everything's stacked against the Americans, or if you're not Brazilian, you're just not going to win. And that year, myself, Penny Thomas from South Africa, and Rafael Lovato Jr. were the first non-Brazilians to ever win a world championship medal. And to see where we were then and to see where we are now, I mean, it's pretty awesome, because everybody was waiting for the day that Americans could like legitimize their own jiu-jitsu, right? And there was for a long time the Brazilian jiu-jitsu versus the American jiu-jitsu. And it's happening, you know, it's happening, and only with a matter of time. But it is funny at the same time to notice that the IBJJF also continually moves the goalpost on how many degrees you have to have on your black belt to award black belts. Now, this Asian lady snuck in the back door, so I have my 3rd degree. But it's very interesting that I think there are, I don't know if it's something that we interpret, or if it's a real thing that they're trying to limit in some ways who can have the level or the certification of black belt.
Sure. So if you open up more tournaments, people are gravitating towards like Eddie Bravo's type of tournament. If you have other top,
you give people
Americans.
power.
Right.
They're having to graduate people into places of power, and the question is whether they want those type of people and those type of minds to have it, or maybe they want to grow their organization big enough so that it doesn't matter if all these other things
right.
open.
I think the privatization, like you bring up, I think it's ultimately not good for the growth. We're gonna plateau a lot lower than we could if that's what this podcast is, the community. We're trying to promote everybody.
Yeah.
Right now we're just doing the schools in our area, but we'd like to just
But a lot of people don't they like to think about the community, but they really think about what slice of the community they can have for themselves.
That's true. That's human nature. That's everybody in general.
That's not a very positive thing of me to say, but I'm just saying.
That's true.
Ed will cut that out.
No. The truth hurts sometimes, for sure. But like you said in the beginning, lead by example. That's what we're trying to do ultimately, is to lead by example and try to promote the people like you who aren't gonna. It really is an ego thing. People put too much of their ego. This is me, and that's ultimately that's going to stunt the growth of it. So if we can point it out, that's the first step. As long we got to admit that we got the problem first before we can fix it.
Yeah, admit the problem. Think creatively around what we can do better. I mean, we should always be asking ourselves how we can do better, not how we can have more. I think that's a big problem, right? Is how do I have more people train jiu-jitsu so I can make more money? No, how do you do things better? And if you do things better, everything else kind of falls into place, right? As a business owner, if I don't look at every student as a number and say, oh, I can give myself a raise if I just get 10 more students through the door, why don't I think about how I do things better? And then if I do things better, maybe it's going to be 15 or 20 students through the door, because our reputation will be that much stronger in the community. I think it's how we frame these types of problems.
Right. A consequence of doing everything that you do better would be more.
Yes.
Fantastic. So what did you think about us? Did we do okay?
This was humorous. This is a good way to
That's all I
spend a
wanted. I
Tuesday
just wanted to
afternoon.
have fun and giggle with you. That's it.
I think that I brought out a lot of laughs.
So Emily, do you have anything that you want to promote right now? Any for the future once this opens
What
up?
can we promote right now? I mean, it's a weird time, guys. I don't know. I mean, I just be a good person and support your teachers and support your community. I mean, everybody is, whether or not this whole pandemic lockdown thing is going away forever or whether we're going to face more of this, I think it just teaches us that we're always in a fragile and uncertain state. It's kind of like that moment in the match where you're not really sure what you got yourself into. And I think it's taught me to just think about my future with less certainty and just to try to be as prepared as I can for everything. And so I would just encourage everybody out there to do more of whatever they're doing, keep it positive, support the people that, that are meaningful and do something that add value to their life, because we are not all made the same way. We all don't approach the world's problems in the same way. And I see a lot of people struggling, and if there's a way that we can lean on each other, lean into each other, learn from each other, I think that's super important right now. I don't think now is the time for ego. I think now is the time to kind of just say, hey, can I help you out? How can we work together? How can we collaborate? Can I help you do something with your business so you're not in such a bad state, in a few months? Or I think now is that time, because we just don't know. Things are going to open up again, and then 3 months from now, we might be in a worse state than we're in right now. Or we could be totally fine, and I hope that we are. But
I want to really thank you for having us down here. And we're here at Princeton BJJ, right? It's a beautiful school, great space, and I really want to thank you for talking with us.
We would love to come and learn from you as soon as this opens back up.
I know you do, but does Dave?
What? Wait, what just happened?
She says she knows I would appreciate learning from her, but she might not be the right weight or size for you.
No, she's going to stand on the side and coach and give me somebody that's around 230 pounds to train with.
So disrespectful. All right, thanks again.
I had a slip of tongue one time, and Ed has transformed it into this.
I'm trying to grow you into a better person, because I know you can be. I know you're not going to be the same person you are now.
I think I'm a pretty good person.
I'm going to fix you.
I'm not broken. You're broken.
You're broke. All right, that's enough. Emily, thanks again. I appreciate you. There you have it. That was episode 8 with Emily. Thanks again to Emily. It was a fantastic interview. I had so much fun, and it was enlightening to all of us.
Yeah, that was really a great listening pleasure right there. You guys have new information on parenting, on training, on leadership. I mean, you know that I'm a 2 and Ed's a 10.
She didn't say I was a 10. She said I scored 10 points and you scored 2 points.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I did cry a little bit. I just want everyone to know. I have feelings.
This was also great because Emily invited us to her gym when she opens back up, and we will definitely be taking her up on that offer.
That's
and
right.
I can't wait to train with her and get our butts kicked by her.
Core class trip coming.
Yeah, we're going to start taking field trips. Everybody,
right.
make sure you get your
That's
parents'
great.
signature.
So, I mean, really, the information that she gave us and just her perspectives on training and life in general, I hope that all of you enjoy. There was a lot of stuff in there, namely for Jess. Thank you very much for sending in your question.
Anybody else that has feedback, it is welcomed. And if you have questions, you can email us, you can comment, other things.
Yes, and more than anything, if you like what you hear, make sure you like us, follow us, and subscribe, all right? Like us on Facebook, Instagram, follow, and subscribe on YouTube. Also, tell your friends. Ask your friends to like, subscribe, and follow. That's the best way to get the message out there. All that stuff is on social media, all social media, Facebook, Instagram, and for Ed, the Twitter.
Please go to Twitter.
At To The Death Podcast. Also email us tothedeathpodcast@gmail.com.
And Emily's stuff, you have her plug stuff?
I do have Emily's stuff.
Well, why don't you pull it up, big boy?
It's Emily Kwok BJJ on all social media and Princeton BJJ on all social media. Make sure you give them both a follow.
Thanks to our musicians, Dennis and Rob. Their music is still in the episode because nobody's saying anything otherwise. So until further notice, those are our songs.
Also, big thank you to our sponsor,
Core BJJ. You can follow them at corebjjnj.com as well as all social medias, Core BJJNJ.
Wow. And he's gotten it right, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, Ed can finally do a read. That's not even a read. That was off of memory. I'm impressed.
Whatever. Let's take a look into the future. What did we do today, David?
We did right now what we did today?
Yeah.
This today?
This day.
Oh, today we took a ride into the city.
To speak with our next guest.
Which is very exciting.
It was, I got to give thanks again to my man, Dave. He really pulled through. And without his shamelessness to reach out to these people that I think were unattainable, he still goes out and pulls it through. And we had another great interview that's going to come up next week. And I'm so excited. I wish I could put both episodes out right now.
I just want to all of you people to know that it is not me. It is the guests that are willing to take time out of their day to come on the podcast to give us their views and perspectives on jiu-jitsu, on life, on all sorts of things, even off topic. So thank you to all of our guests.
Yes, and they're helping share our goals to grow this community as big as possible. So until next week, this is To The Death Podcast.
I don't want to wait till next week, Ed. Now. I want it now.
You just do the
Where
sign
can I
off,
listen?
please.
Where can I listen if I want to hear right now?
If you want to hear right now, you go to YouTube, you go to Buzzsprout, you go to Apple, you go to iHeartRadio, you go to Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify.
Or tothedeathpodcast.com.
There you go. Can we stop it now?
Now we can. Have a great night.
To The Death Podcast.